This last week, it was announced that Marvel fired the creative team behind the upcoming series Daredevil Born Again and are starting from scratch, even though they already shot around half the show reportedly. And then it was also reported yesterday that they're talking about using Secret Wars as an excuse to try to reboot the entire MCU, which insinuates that they think that there's a problem with it. But a lot of people like myself who've been critical of Marvel in recent years are wondering, like, well, why now? What changed? And I think we got more answers from this article from the Direct that we put out a banger. Marvel shocked by Ant-Man 3 negative reviews report. And that's the headline. Joanna Robinson, co-author of MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, recently discussed how Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was perceived as a home run by Marvel before it debuted. And then third paragraph down, the box office returns for Ant-Man 3 reflected its dismal reception and contributed to the notion among fans that Marvel Studios has lost its step or several. And yeah, if you go over to Box Office Mojo, you can see it actually had a pretty good opening weekend domestically, making over $100 million, but then it was followed, let me see the drop off in here. So followed by an 82% drop, and that was one of the biggest drops for a Marvel movie, which means the word of mouth was just terrible on this movie, even though it had a great opening weekend. And in total, it only brought in just under 500, so around $476 million globally, which sounds like a pretty good chunk of change until you take into account that the movie cost $200 million to make. You can tack on another $100 million in marketing. That means this movie needed to make at least $600 million in order to break even, which this fell way short of. But I'll jump back into the article going into this. Inside Joanna Robinson, who authored the new tell-all book MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, was interviewed on the latest episode of the Watch podcast. During the interview, she spoke on the atmosphere at Marvel Studios before Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania hit theaters. The general consensus amongst the Marvel higher-ups was that they felt like they had something good. And this is a quote. Marvel Studios is aware of what's happening to their brand. My understanding, having talked to some people, is that Quantumania really shook them, and I'm sure Secret Invasion shook them further. And that was a show, for people who don't know, cost over $200 million in order for them to produce. It starred a legacy character from the MCU. And even in its premiere episode, it couldn't even break 1 million viewers in the first week of premiere. So that's pretty bad and saying quite a bit. But Quantumania really shook them because they felt they had something good, because they all internally thought everyone's going to love this. And I can see that being an issue for them, because when you're making movies, sometimes you can tell that it's a movie that it's like, okay, we don't care about this. We're just trying to put something out there because we have to put something out there, or let's just be done with it. But it seems like from what I'm gathering from this, they felt like Ant-Man and the Wasp wasn't one of those movies. They thought like, this is something that people will like. And when you see something like that, you put out a movie that you think the public is going to enjoy, and they don't, then a smart studio would actually reflect on that and be like, okay, what do we do wrong? Where are we wrong on this one? Of course, Robinson explained this sentiment did not prove true, and Quantumania was met with highly negative reviews and suffered one of the worst 2-week box office drops in superhero movie history. And I already showed you that, but just going into the reviews on this, I mean, it wasn't terrible amongst fans. I mean, let me see, where top critics. So top critics, I mean, that's just abysmal. All audiences, it's 75%. So not the worst, but I mean, also not great, especially when you're comparing it to other MCU projects. I mean, 75 is pretty low for that. I mean, especially when they were thinking it was going to be good, but I think they might be really focusing on the critics who just absolutely hated this movie. And then here's another quote from that article. And then they put it out and people didn't, and then they were like, oh no, our internal barometer is not attuned to what people want anymore. With Quantumania, they were like, we put out a banger, and then that's not how a lot of people felt. And I will give, if this is all true, I will give Marvel credit for kind of reflecting and figuring out like, okay, where did they go wrong, sort of thing. But the biggest issue is just the fact that people have been telling them for years now where they're going wrong with their properties. Like people like myself, I'm not going to necessarily take credit, but just people like myself who are online comment sections saying what we do and do not like about these properties. And a lot of times we just get dismissed by studios as like a vocal minority or as haters or something like that, even though I was someone who used to go to watch every Marvel movie in theaters opening weekend and probably watch it several times. And then in recent years, I mean, I just don't even seem to care anymore, just for the fact that they've been slipping in quality significantly. And we get told off about it, like saying like, oh, well, these are for kids, it's not for you, and all that jazz. And it's like, okay, fine, if that's the movie if that's what you want to do, then okay, you can do that. I'll just accept that these aren't for me anymore, and I will move on. And the problem is, a lot of people have done that now, and they're starting to take note, and they're trying to course correct. And really, my solution is just to kind of go back to how they were doing things in phase one. I mean, not necessarily have the studio manufacture them on an assembly line, but actually bring in creatives, directors, writers, and try to craft each one as if it's its own movie and not just a piece of a puzzle that you have to watch in order to understand the next one, or it's simply just there to set up the next product that they're going to be putting out. And with the damage that we've seen done to the brand of the MCU, it'll take quite a bit of time before it can actually fix itself. I said in my video yesterday talking about rebooting the franchise, what I think they should actually do. And if they do want to reboot it, I would say, like, not necessarily do a hard reboot, but like after Secret Wars, if that's where they're going to draw the line, it's like, okay, make Secret Wars like the cutoff. And then the movies that they put out after that, make them feel like they're almost separate from the previous MCU, where you bring in your teams like Fantastic Four or X-Men, things like that. You bring in those groups and you can sprinkle in some other new characters. And then after like a phase of doing that, then you can start filtering in some of the legacy characters from the early era of the MCU. But yet it's when you can bring in like Captain America, you can bring in Iron Man, but you just have them recasted versions of those characters. So you can just kind of keep them going, because I know it'd be too expensive to bring back characters or bring back actors like Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans to reprise a role. So yeah, you just recast them and treat it like it's a James Bond type character, where you keep the character, but you just keep having different actors playing them. And if they were to kind of continue like that and then go back into how they made the movies in the initial phase of the MCU, I think they can actually salvage their audience again and bring people back into the fold. But it will take years, and I'm not sure if they want to invest that much time and effort in order to try to bring this back, or if they just want to kind of muscle through what they're doing, which I think that's ultimately going to be the choice that they go, because superhero movies are kind of fading out, and I believe they sense that right now. So they're just going to try to get as much out of it while they can and then be done with it. But at least that's what I think about all this. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. And if you like this video, make sure you click that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.